I am currently speaking to Dr. Judy Wood, and she contacted me today, and we've been discussing these rather terrible fires in California, and we were obviously quite a lot of people contacted me on Facebook saying, "Oh, look, it's directed energy weapons are in use, and what does Dr. Judy Wood think of this, and what do you think of it?" And it's definitely directed energy weapons. So I just wanted to say that so that Dr. Judy could tell me and tell anyone else who listens to this what her thoughts are on this, and why we've got to be careful, basically, in what we're doing with this.
Yeah, I wonder if it's somewhat of a psyop that's been unleashed too, because either that or it's a demonstration of how stupid people have become. They don't know how to problem solve. I've gotten a bunch of messages too about this, and I knew there's fires going on there, but fine, that's what you expect. But this year just happens to be worse. But there's like one of the examples that I've seen people use is fire coming out of a tree. Well, the Keebler elves build their cookie oven in the tree. That's the cartoon version. But squirrels live in rotted out parts of trees. There's holes in trees and logs that animals live in. So it's reasonable. And I just recently took down a tree in my backyard that was rotted from the inside. and yeah, so you'd have fire coming out from inside where burn up the dead
I suppose
stuff.
It depends how the fire actually gets into that part of the tree, though, doesn't it? And that's what's perhaps more difficult for people to imagine, because they imagine the tree catching fire from the outside. But if, as I was trying to say to you in a message earlier on, but not very well, if a piece of embers, floats down and into the actual part of the inside of the tree, then take it from there.
Okay, if you put this chunk of a log in your fireplace, it's going to burn the inside first because the outside is still alive, and so it's wet. And the inside's ready to cook. At the same temperature, in the same environment all over, the inside will burn first. And one of these hollowed out dead log, it's dead on the inside, but it's live on the outside.
Actually, because this guy was walking past this tree and he did a video of it, because I've seen this video, and it looks very weird, but it just actually depends when he walked past it. If it had started burning just like 10 minutes before he's walked past it, then that's the effect, isn't it? Whereas if he, if he went back an hour later...
And after it burns on the inside a while, it's then dried more of the greenwood. And that might start being able to burn eventually. But greenwood is harder to catch fire, as people know who cut down trees. You have to wait a year approximately before you put it in your fireplace, or else you use up too much energy just drying it out before you can burn it.
Yes. And of course we've seen some of these apparently strange effects, and I posted something to people saying this looks very strange, because some people are saying, oh, these are toasted cars, and they've got this metal coming out and stuff. But you made some very obvious statements in one of your messages to somebody, didn't you? So maybe you want to talk about that.
Well, true, but I did see some of those burnt cars, and I won't say toasted cars. They're pictures like I use in my presentations to show the difference between what happened in New York City and normal car fires. Mm-hmm. And they're very different. Like you see, different colors. It looks like a calico kind of coloring. You remember the bus in New York City? How it was kind of uniform color. You didn't see scorch marks on it. But these cars, you see scorch marks on it. Yellow, black, and it all, as I say, calico looking. And that's normal for car fires, as well as I call them fangs, the broken glass sticking down. Yeah, glass is going to break out because it can't expand much before it's going to shatter. At different temperatures, high heat, it's going to shatter. It's going to break. It's not going to melt. Some guy was saying, oh, look, the melted out window. No, they're shattered. You can see the jagged edges around them.
So really, in a couple of things, you said there, you've really got to look very carefully. And if the picture isn't of high enough resolution, then you aren't going to see those details. Or if it's taken from too far away, you're not going to see those little pieces of glass, are you? That's one of the things to think about.
Right. Right. So why, I used to ask somebody, why do you need it to look weird? I mean, why is that if if you don't know one way or the other, why are you jumping to one conclusion? And I studied before I started talking out loud, in public about, the 9/11 stuff. I'd been studying it for 5 years.
Yes.
Or 4 years anyway. And it's, to know what I was talking about and to be absolutely sure of it. I don't go on a whim. You destroy your credibility if you do that.
Exactly.
Because you're going to be, guessing this, next day guess that. And if you find somebody who does that, they have no credibility.
This is exactly what I posted on Facebook to somebody that, you've been studying 9/11, because I know, we spoke about this when I saw you in South Carolina, that, you started sharing stuff with somebody in 2004, didn't you? And you just started chatting over and working stuff out. And that was 3 years after the event. That was even before that's while you were still at Clemson and you were still kind of keeping your head down quite a bit. And that was 3 years. So for somebody to come out and say, it's directed energy weapons in California fires, after 2-3 days, 24 hours.
Yeah. And I'd like to ask, how many fires have you studied? And in depth, in great detail, how many fires have you studied? Are you a forensic, forest fire studier? And what are the conditions? Are the grounds wet? What were the speed of the winds? Yep. And, like people wondering why houses burn where trees weren't burning. Well, that's greenwood. Yep. Houses have dry wood in them. That's just one general statement, but there's lots of details that go with that. And looking at what materials burned in all other forest fires, it matters as to how they travel and how the wind is blowing. And when was the last time it rained? Is the ground wet? Is it dry?
Right.
What's the specific heat of the various materials involved in this fire compared to other fires? And if you don't know that, how can you say this one's weird if this is the only one you've ever looked at?
Yes.
That's the most bizarre part of it.
That's right. I mean, you really need to study several fires, many fires really, and get close-up images
in depth.
And a lot more data, and compare it with other. For example, you did a comparison between the Seattle Kingdome and the World Trade Center, just as one aspect of what you were looking at.
Just looking at the seismic thing. Here's another thing we can look at right now with the California fires. How many firefighters have been killed in California?
Right.
Versus how many firefighters were killed in Manhattan, in New York City, in the World Trade Center? 343 there. And I don't even know if any have been killed in California, except maybe in a traffic accident from falling asleep at the wheel because they've been working too long.
Right.
But not so much fire-related. They know how to size up normal fires.
Yes.
And so we can look at that piece of evidence. But why is this taking off like wildfire, so to speak? Yeah. Why do people need to feel like it's a weird fire?
That's right. I mean, I suppose what people, perhaps there's some subconscious need for them to validate reuse of this weapon, or whatever you want to call it, call it a system, a weapon, I don't know what you want to call it, but, I think there's somehow that technology perhaps is a better term, there's some need for them to see more evidence of that being used again somehow, and I don't know, why that is particularly, because from what's...
Or they want to, they're trigger happy, they want to be the first. And that's why there's all this spilling of videos all over the place. Either that or someone is really motivating them to do it to, spread disinfo and, as we used to say, turn people's brains into a salt and pepper shaker. Just make it so people cannot tell the difference between reality and myth.
And I mean,
they don't know how to diagnose the problem.
One comment I'd like to make about that, one of the videos we watched a bit of together, which was done by this lady, I don't know her name, or if she gave her name, and she starts off showing all these temperatures of melting points of various substances, which is quite good in of itself. And then she goes on to go through the pictures and say, look at this picture, look at that picture, look at this bit of video, look at that bit of video, you can clearly see this, you clearly see that. And then she includes a clip from the BEM presentation that you did in 2012 where you're talking about the toasted cars. And she says, oh, here's Dr. Judy Woods. And I'm thinking, yeah, but why can't you get it right? It might sound quite trivial to some people, but in other words, if you can't get a simple detail like that right, then what about all these other details you put in before us? Do you give us confidence? I'm maybe being a bit pernickety, but I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
The same thing is if somebody can't get details right and has blatant errors, what kind of a researcher are they? Like that Portugal one that I sent you earlier today. The guy's talking about direct energy weapons. I mean, that's a red flag right there when somebody calls it a direct energy weapon. Then he's reading something from another website, and it talks about directed energy weapons, and he reads it correctly.
Yeah.
But he doesn't get his own speech correct.
And this leads us on to the other sort of situation is that, and I try to, and we've had conversations about this before, but it's worth repeating here, it's that, you have done science degrees, you have done published peer-reviewed papers in engineering journals, you've got all that experience.
And I've not been proved wrong anywhere.
And
not had to redact anything.
You having done that was as a result of decades of work, in your field, starting at, I don't know, in the normal sort of school age, I suppose, and working right through 20, 30 years, 40 years later, and that's how he got all that experience. And
also I know the importance of not, putting out questionable guesses, but to put out what you know that you know that you know. Otherwise, who'd want to listen to you again?
The problem is, for people out there, is that there aren't many people like you. In fact, you're almost unique, I would say, in that you have got all those credentials, that training, and those analytical skills and so forth. And there aren't very many people with that level of skill who have, been in the alternative media. I can't think of that many. Talk show hosts that have got PhDs in engineering or science subjects, hard science subjects, not soft science subjects, ones where you're having to do like, tensorial, use tensors in mathematics and this sort of thing, grad, div and curl and all that stuff, which I know a little bit about, but I certainly, as I've said to you before, I just kind of got to my top level of maths in the first year of university and didn't feel I could go any further than that.
But more importantly, my background also is in observing physical phenomena. It's my observational skills that are at the top, and I've been kind of marveled at for all the way through by my various professors, because I'll say something I point out, and they're thinking, no, it can't be. And then they go and look at it more carefully themselves and study it, and they say, oh, yep, you're right. And actually, my PhD, the result of the work disproved all theory up to that date.
Yeah.
So when they do that, somebody's going to question it. But it was rock solid. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about it. It was physical evidence. I was looking at deformations around and across a bimaterial interface.
Yep. Yeah.
And it had been assumed that it was a two-dimensional problem. No, it has to be looked at as a three-dimensional problem, because what's happening across the interface is also happening through the thickness.
And this is a point, that people can't sort of experience that level of thinking until they've looked at a real-world problem and really studied it.
And know the and know the importance of getting it right.
And then you learn about the materials. You learn. I mean, you made this comment earlier on about things like specific heat, talking about how materials burn. You need to know the specific heat. You need to know the latent heat. You need to know the thermal transfer characteristics and things like that. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I got to tell my story here about this thing about
Yeah,
global warming.
absolutely.
The warm atmosphere of the hotter days, therefore that's heating up the ocean, causing all these hurricanes. Well, I asked somebody, well, you think of the difference in specific heat of the air versus the water. How fast can you heat up your bathtub with a hairdryer?
Yeah, and you can imply that in the same sort of way to studying these fires. That you can just they've drawn this conclusion about global warming really from spurious data, really, or they claim to have all this data, but really, I think a lot of it is not being used how it should be used, and they've actually admitted they've changed it. I mean, I'm changing the subject here, or they've massaged this data.
Well, but it's the same kind of thing. Is that people who are listening to this the media don't know how to discern if something is stupid or not stupid. And the deal of saying that the higher hotter summer create all these hurricanes, or the hotter air from global warming. I mean, it's so funny. It's sad, but it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, that's the old thing. If you don't laugh, you'd cry, kind of thing. So.
Right. And okay, now applying that back to this fire business, it's really sickening, kind of. It's like this one video I saw where it was probably the first one where the person is talking about why are the trash cans melted, and then they walk past a melted trash can. They don't point it out.
Okay, that trash can isn't melted because it was far enough away from the flames to actually not melt.
And why are the trees? Why do the trees have leaves on them? Well, they're the ones that are over the trash can that wasn't in the fire.
And one of the things I did notice, and I thought it was weird, and I'll hold my hands up and say yes, I sent round a message about the weirdness of some of this, and some of it does look weird to the untrained eye. And what we're saying is yes, well maybe you just need more training, etc. And so there's that aspect, but. I also noticed that these houses in these neighbourhoods seem to be very close together for the states, because we're always told, and we saw this when we came to visit you, that many of the houses have quite a lot of space around them.
Oh, those are the older houses. The newer houses, people want big houses. There's even some of those communities around here where they want big houses. And they don't want to have to mess with the yards much. And there's just enough room to get your lawnmower from the front yard to the backyard. There's not even enough room to drive your car through. You have to drive around the block, and the garage is on the back side of the house. There's a special alley access. So the houses are that close that they're literally, a lawnmower, a push mower is about all you can get between them.
Yeah, I mean, that's more like it is here, you know.
Right. They're not necessarily, touching, but they're pretty darn close. And I understand that the winds today, I hadn't paid much attention to the fire news, but I turned on the streaming, because I don't have to do a TV. I turned on the streaming video of it, and they mentioned that the wind had died down from like 50 miles an hour to 10 miles an hour. So apparently it had been high winds.
Well, I mean, that's it. And that, I don't think any of the videos mentioned that.
They're fanning the fire.
I mean, that if you've got that much wind... I mean, we can imagine a scenario, and this is... I'll say that again. We can imagine a scenario where, for example, a fire had started naturally, and they did... let's say, tweak the weather, twiddle the knobs for the weather, just to set the winds going, We don't know that.
Yeah.
That's another possible scenario. And then we get all these people saying, oh, this is a directed energy weapon, when really all that had happened is somehow they've managed to whip the winds up artificially somehow. Again...
If you want to get a oven fire, I'm talking about like oven for melting metal, you get bellows to add more air to it. So
if you've got a fan fire like that, then the temperatures are going to be, I don't know how much higher, but a bit higher than normal,
And houses are enclosed, so once the fire gets rip roaring, it can build up heat. but still be fed from the
You know,
from
I
the
mean, we
wind.
don't want to go through point by point all of these videos because people are just going to believe what they want to believe, as we know, as we've experienced over the last.
Because they need to
For
believe
some
it for
reason.
some reason, and that's the thing that
Yeah.
I find so upsetting. It's that we have this many people who are so gullible, and they all want to jump on this bandwagon to see who can put out whatever video the fastest. What they're doing is really developing a bad name for conspiracy theorists.
That's true, and I mean, one of the things that Richard Hall and I think we both said this, is that whenever we get these horrible things happening now, you know, had this Vegas incident, we had these fires, we had them in Portugal, we had incidents in the UK, we had one in Manchester a few months back.
Sandy Hook.
That was 2012 now, so that's 5 years ago. But you know, unless you're on the ground, unless you've got 40,000 pictures and 10 hours of video of the whole thing, you know, unless you've got seismic data, unless you've got weather data, etc., it's really tough. It's going to be really tough to draw any conclusions and know that things are, you know, get to know things, you know.
Know what it is that you know.
In other words, what I'm saying exactly, and what I'm saying is that 9/11 was kind of the thing because there was so much so many different types of evidence. If you went and dug it all out and saved it, which is what you did, you know, and that's we haven't got the same range of evidence for any of these other incidents. And unless you're there, unless you go, and then what Richard Hall does, you know, as you know, he goes and knocks on people's doors now. That's how he does his investigations. He goes and speaks to people. He records it. He asks them if they'll go on camera with it, you know, and he does it all himself. He doesn't just read web pages, you know. He doesn't. Of course, he does that sometimes. He doesn't just do that. You know, he's not an armchair researcher like me.
Right, the website business, that is really setting up our culture for failure. Imagine if people really didn't know what an eclipse was. What would they have thought of what happened this
it's a Photoshop
August?
job, you know. We photoshopped it because the Earth.
Or actually experiencing it. We would act like the cows acted. You know, they mooed and they went stampeding to the woods because they had no idea what was going on. They were in a panic. The owners had to come out and make sure their cows were okay because the cows get bent out of shape. But also the birds acted like it was dusk for 1 minute, and then they went silent like it was nighttime for a couple of minutes or 3 minutes, and then they thought it was the morning and started waking up. And same with the bugs.
That's right.
Because they didn't know about eclipses, and I bet you in caveman era they thought the gods were punishing them, turning out the lights. It was the end of the world. And you could probably get people worked up in a big frenzy over that. Our culture is being dumbed down back to that. And that's what's so concerning. Another comment I made to someone is about, how do you destroy a country? You get rumors started where people don't know to check facts. And I use the example of a high school.
Right.
You start passing around, gossip about somebody and something, and pretty soon they're an axe murderer, and we got to go kill them.
This is it. This is the problem, and I've had a lot of posts on my Facebook account, and there's two people, one of whom I know personally, the other I have never met, but they've met you, and they're arguing over one of these pictures of the fires. One saying it's fake, the other saying it's real. And these are two people that are both friends of mine on Facebook, and they're just arguing over this. And I'm thinking, well, how confident can you be? Were you there? What are the, how much have you studied it?
What's the circumstance?
And I'm thinking, why argue over it? Why can't you just say, I don't know, which is what I said. I don't know whether it's genuine or not. It looks genuine to me, but I don't know in this case, and I don't want to spend 2 hours of my life studying it to work out if it is or not at this point. Thank you very much.
Like I said about the Malaysian Airlines, what was it, 370? It said, well, people were asking me in radio interviews about it, and I said, well, was there such a plane? Did it exist? And did it take off? And if it did, which direction was it going in? I don't know any of those questions, so I'm done.
Yeah.
Instead, here we had the Where's Waldo media thing. It's funny, people started copying that after I said it. That, like today, maybe it went here, the next day, maybe it went over there, where they had no idea if the plane even existed.
Yep.
and how stupid of a population to fall for that kind of stuff, or even promote it. And that's what we have with this wildfire business.
Yes. I think that's what it becomes, really, unfortunately. And I think another issue is that somebody was sort of saying to me on Facebook, oh, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? And I say, well, I don't really know, and I'm just a guy with a website. And he says, oh, you're not. You've done this 9/11 research. You need to comment on this. You need to comment on this. And I'm saying,
you got to give a knee-jerk reaction.
Saying, look, I don't need to comment on this. Thank you very much. I'm just a volunteer. And he says, oh, well, I would comment on it. And I says, well, yeah, fair enough. You would comment on it.
You know less.
I find it quite upsetting to look at these pictures. Actually, thank you very much. And I don't really want to. I'm not paid to do this. And I think there's that aspect to it. We're not forced to do anything unless we actually agree to do it. We make an agreement with somebody.
But are we storytellers? If we haven't studied the problem, all it is storytelling. And there's somebody who had posted something about, look at this weirdness because the fire abruptly stops and it was burned area, not burned area. I think they're in my book. We're reading about dust abruptly stopping, and now that is weird because like if you get a pile of flour on the floor, drop a cookie sheet on it, it's going to poof out, and you're going to have heavier stuff, and it's gradually going to increase as the distance goes out. But fire isn't like that. Fire burns something or it isn't burning something.
Yeah.
If you have a log that's half burned in your fireplace, and when you douse it, it's burned and then it's not burned.
And
or
well, all I was going to say is I think we sort of covered what we wanted to say about this, and it goes back to things that I think you said before many times. You know what you know and know what you don't know, and never confuse the two. And obviously you can expand on that a bit, but that's basically it. And
exactly, and we have a whole bunch of videos getting. People are spitting out there to see who can put out the most amount of guesswork. They want to be the first to guess at something. That's like a particular person. I guess she's not around any longer. Web Fairy, who said it's fires, it's bombs, it's thermite, it's directed energy. See, I was right. I had
one of those I said was correct, and so I wasn't doing too badly. But a lot of those videos as well that you mentioned, and how many of those? And I've watched one, I think, possibly one and a bit. How many of them start off with saying, "Hello, my name is Dr. John Smith, and I did a PhD in physics, or I did a PhD in pyrotechnical engineering or something. Here is my biography and CV and everything, resume." How many of them start off like that? I don't think there's many. So, know who you're dealing with as well, please, if you can, and what are their credentials to comment on these issues. How, I'm not saying that because they haven't got credentials it stops them from, from making good observations. But it's interpreting the observations. What experience do they have to interpret those observations as well as making them?
How many fires
have they
studied?
They studied, as you said earlier on? That's basically the same question. So I don't know.
I remember for the World Trade Center, the underwriters lab was trying to do a mock-up of the floor. I think it was a half a floor span, and they cooked it for twice as long at twice the temperature, and they still couldn't get it to fail.
Yeah.
But these are people who were
but they
good
didn't
at fires.
Just make a YouTube video and post it and say, there you are, that's the explanation.
Right.
They did actually physically set it up. We know what they were up to now, of course, but
right. They tried to produce, but they couldn't.
So and there was a public report published on that with the appropriate reviews and everything for what they were worth. But anyway, I don't know whether there's anything else you wanted to say at this point on this, because I'll put this onto my website and maybe just
comparing it to what happened to the World Trade Center. Okay, let's compare the California fires. Did all the buildings turn to dust and go up?
Yes.
Yeah. The biggest thing is how much you discredit people, other people like me. My name is mentioned in a bunch of these videos, and that's disinformation, and that's denigrating my work, and I don't like that. Know what it is that you know, and don't mix it in saying, oh, somebody. What's a good example of? Let's use the example of sterilizing something, and because that sterilizing gets rid of bacteria, doesn't matter if you get it dirty after that. It's sterilized.
Yeah.
It's using it something out of context that when you don't understand what the mechanism is.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, I think with that, then I'll say, I'll post this, and
thank you,
and hopefully it'll help a few people out. We may sound a bit, belligerent and so forth, but it's you've got to go on. Yeah,
I'd like to add one more thing. The whole importance of this is how we're going to be destroyed is by allowing ourselves to become stupid. And if people can't tell the difference between truth and facts and reality with storytelling, imagine what's going to happen to them. They can be wrapped around somebody's feet. They're easy to control.
Yeah, that's it.
And that's the creepy part.
Okay, well, thanks very much for spending some time with me, and I'll post this around, and that's good, and we shall talk again very soon.